So we'll get into it. And I guess we'll start by sort of what have you been up to? I know you were, I guess, job hunting. Obviously, our New York Riptide season got cut short. How is that? How have you been dealing with that? You were living in the city. Sort of just you want to talk about what's going on with you as of right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually was working. I was in the insurance industry for 6 years out of school, and I actually left that job right before we left for Vancouver, CK. So right before we went and played for Team USA in indoor. I was just like didn't really love the job that much, and kind of thought to myself like, I don't really want to go back after this 2 weeks off. So I left the job and then played in the games. Then Matt Dunn and I went and traveled Europe for a little bit, but then obviously wanted to kind of give lacrosse its full attention. Obviously, unfortunately, it was during a COVID shut season, so started back on the job hunt and just trying to work out at this point. Like it's just been so weird, altering your plans. But now we have the PLL championship series to worry about. I think we're 38 days out at this point, so trying to get the body in shape for that.
Pretty excited about that as well. So you talked about sort of your job hunt, and I guess you're sticking with lacrosse, and you sort of started that right out of college. What sort of was it just something that in the office you didn't want to do anymore? Or was it like, hey, I want to keep following my passion of lacrosse? What sort of was going through your head at that point?
Yeah, I mean, the job was great in the regard that they were very flexible in still letting me play. But it just wasn't a product I was really excited about selling. I just kind of always liked the aspect of, dealing with people and selling something and, having that, I guess, competitive nature, kind of like what lacrosse brings. But, it was definitely one of those things where I wanted to kind of check all the boxes about, potentially coaching. I think we talked about that, CK, like went down to Nashville and looked at some opportunities there. But I think at the end of the day, I wanted to stay close to home. And one of the things I did like in my other job was the technology companies that I was working with. It just seemed that they were super innovative and, always kind of ahead of the curve. And as we kind of think about going into this next, phase of, the next 20, 30 years, you're going to be dealing with tech, just like you guys starting your own app, right? So ended up taking a few interviews, but luckily got a job during this pandemic. So I started about 6 weeks ago. I've been in like the training phase. So I've just been, doing a lot of training in that, and then training myself, for this championship series.
What'd you settle on for a job?
Yeah, so the company's called Pure Storage. So what they do is they sell both a hardware and a software for companies that want to house their data. So we work a lot with like companies that are doing, machine learning or artificial intelligence projects. There's just so many things you can do now with that data. Think about like a healthcare company that needs to be able to take a look at, tons of images to find cancerous cells. Well, now you have these algorithms that can look at 1 million images a day and be pretty accurate, where a doctor can only do so many in a day. So, to be able to get that data and to use it quickly, you need a infrastructure in place, which is what we sell to healthcare companies and large enterprises.
Is there anything outside of just the product itself that you kind of saw as like a bigger positive with this new company that as opposed to where you were before?
Yeah, and not to knock the old place, but the one thing, and it kind of goes back into a lot of lacrosse things that I loved about it, was everybody that I spoke to in the interview process, one of the first things they talked about was the culture of the company, which it's been harder for me to fully understand that while we're all, I'm on these Zoom calls every day, so I'm not in the office with them, but the company does have like a tremendous culture of just, people wanting to help people getting excited. We do one thing where the entire sales organization across the globe is on an email thread, and every time that there's a win, you have to write up a report, and it's a constant kind of back and forth, like just positive banter that's going on. So that was for me, for somebody that's been on teams forever, to have that, almost, consistently talked about in the interview process was huge for me.
Love that. So you talked about just sort of sports sort of translating into the business world. And I think growing up, everybody always says sports translates to everything you do in life. And you're like, you always agree as a kid, like 100%. Yeah, that's true. But then you start to realize it getting out of college. And I guess you worked in a company and now transitioning to another one. How would you say like sports has helped you in that sense of, in the business sense of going after college?
Yeah, the two biggest places, I think number one would be work ethic, right? You're instilled at a young age that if you want to be the best, it's going to take a lot of hard work. It's going to take sacrifices too, right? Like right now, we're sacrificing our weekends after working all week. In college, you're sacrificing spring breaks and, summers at the beach where you have to still work out. So like understanding that like to be great at something is going to take a long time. It's going to be a long process, but investing that time is almost a direct correlation to you being good at what you do. So that helped. And, also just like the organization aspect of it, right? Like, when you're a college Division I athlete, you have school, you have all the demands from your team. So for you to be able to juggle a schedule like that, when you come into owning a patch, a sales patch, and having to navigate different customers, different meetings, all the rest, like being an organized person is going to really help you out. So I'd say work ethic and organization are the two things that I take in sports and try to apply in the business world.
I like how you dropped the little "be the best" in there.
Well, I said it without saying it, I guess.
But just kind of transitioning to lacrosse a little bit now. As you're starting a new job, obviously times are a little crazy right now, and now you got the PLL coming back. What's your schedule look like right now, and how are you kind of mixing lacrosse into that, and what are some of the things that you're doing to kind of get ready?
Yeah. So one thing when COVID happened, one of the things I've tried to do is keep a schedule that I'm going to commit to every day. Just because it just, the more scheduled I am when there's nothing going on, I think is the easiest thing. So what I've been doing is, 6 a.m. wake up every day. And then I'm working out in the morning. It'll consist of probably weightlifting one day, 2 days of like a high intensity interval training, and then 2 days of strict conditioning. So I'm doing that in the morning. Hopefully I'm trying to get to my desk right around 7:45, 8 o'clock. And then, luckily for me, I'm back at my parents' house in Yorktown, Westchester County. And I was at the field, then I'll try to go either doing a lacrosse lesson or try to go back to the turf around 6, 7 o'clock at night to shoot. And I ran into a guy in our town who just played at the University of Utah, and he was there getting shots. So I got his number. So I'm just texting him every day just to get some extra shots in. But that's I've tried to stay with that, that regimen. It's tough, but at the same time, I don't have much else going on that I can't do that. So it's been easy in that regard.
With your schedule with Corona, trying to keep things more tight or anything like that. Are you a super guy who's takes your diet really seriously or nutrition or anything like that? Or are you kind of toning that, kind of not toning that down, but watching that more seriously, as you're kind of scheduling things out and trying to be more meticulous about what you're doing, especially with all the time you have and obviously with the PLL coming up?
Yeah. It's funny. The first thing is, I started to cook more because normally I would just seamless everything at my apartment in the city. And, as you can imagine, there's just about anything you could want on seamless. Some of it not so good for you. So I started to cook more, which, obviously when you're cooking, you're more conscious of what exactly you're putting into your body because you're literally cooking it. So I have been a little, I wouldn't say I'm a health freak. But I do try to, I try to get my sugars and everything from natural fruit. I'm a big, I probably have a smoothie either for breakfast or for lunch, depending on which one I don't have it for, pretty much every day. And that smoothie is typically about 2 to 3 cups of fruit, some spinach, peanut butter, and then a scoop of vegan protein with almond milk. So I try to do that pretty much every day. Try to keep it, and then the snacks throughout the day. Just try to do a lot of veggies and hummus, but nothing. Not too crazy, but I try to keep it lean.
You talked about it when we were running on Saturday. So we talked about like the intermittent fasting. Have you ever tried it? And you said you stop at like 9 o'clock, I think it was.
Yeah. So one of the things I did start in during the COVID pandemic was I basically thought of like 10 things that I want to accomplish every day. So I made this like kind of this master spreadsheet. And it was just a way for me to kind of like keep myself accountable. So I got things on there like X amount of hours slept. So one of the things was, after 9 p.m. I'm not eating. So I was finding myself like, right before bed, passing the kitchen, just kind of just perusing around, seeing what's in the fridge, seeing what's in the drawers. And then I just kind of stand there for like 2 minutes. I'm like, crap, I just ate a ton of garbage right before I'm about to sleep. So I'm cutting it off at 9 p.m. And then obviously, if I'm waking up at 6 every day, right, that's 9 hours. So I want to get to bed by 10 or 11 to get 7-8 hours of sleep every day. So in a way, I guess I'm limiting probably about 10 or so hours of the day I'm not eating, but a lot of that's me sleeping. But I've heard, a lot of people have tried that out with really good results. I mean, they say like it's crazy when you first start, you feel like super hungry, but you get used to it, I guess, is what I hear, and guys are kind of swear by it.
Yeah, I've been doing it for like 4 or 5 months now, like most of 2020. And I listen to like Rogan a lot, and he has like Rhonda Patrick on there. She's like all about like longevity and like just health and just general fitness stuff. And she's like a huge advocate of it. And like I feel so much better in the mornings. And like same with you, like I'd always be eating right before I go to bed. And like the biggest thing I've noticed is just like I feel so much better in the mornings, and just like my energy levels are so much better, and just like it kind of is like a game to me a little bit, where it's like, all right, like I want to try to get like 16-8, but like if I go a little early or whatever, but like sometimes like me and my roommate both do it, and we'll kind of see who can like fast longest. Obviously I'm not training for a legit sport, but for me it's like I feel great from it and I love it. And like for you, like apparently based on what Rhonda Patrick said, you want to try to shoot for like at least like a 14-hour fast, and then like she says like 15-9 and like 16-8 is like optimal. But that's just, I'm not an expert or anything, I'm just regurgitating what she says.
Yeah, and it's funny too. I have noticed like when I was living in the city, and obviously there was probably some more distractions just living there in general, but like there was a group of us that would get together and work out in the mornings. So we'd be on the field at 6:30 to work out before work, and I used to notice like I would wake up and like have to chug, C4 or like something just to like get myself to bike ride down there. But like I do find myself now waking up like really no problem. Maybe I'll throw like, a couple grapes or like a couple nuts or something like that just to have my stomach have something in me. But I'm waking up not having to use any pre-workout, and I'm been enjoying the workouts too.
Have you cut that off?
Yeah. Well, I cut it off because I ran out of it. That is one of the reasons. But I haven't needed it. Like I haven't felt the need to buy more of it. So the Riptide, we were going through that stuff like crazy. So
we were hammering it. It was great.
Yeah.
You talked about 10 things on your spreadsheet. So what were your 10 things that you tried to do each day?
Yeah, so I'm still doing it. I'll actually just read it. I got it right here in front of me. So it's eight right now. It's 8 hours in bed, and the reason I had 7 hours of sleep, but I didn't think that my watch was being as accurate as I wanted it to be. So now I'm just saying I'm in bed. If I'm waking up at 6, right, I'm in bed by 10 p.m. the latest. Trying to stay off my phone and maybe watch a little bit of TV, but nothing crazy. So 8 hours in bed. One of the things I did start doing during coronavirus was meditating. So I got the Calm app, and it's honestly a fantastic way to start my day. So so I'll work out, shower, eat breakfast, and then right before I sit down at my laptop, I'll go through either anywhere from a 10 to 15 minute meditation practice. And you basically just you shut down. It really focuses on your breathing. makes you think a lot too. Like just actually it makes you think just by like completely exiting everything in your mind. And I found like stress levels are good. I honestly started it because I was living in the city, and obviously that was the epicenter of the pandemic. And I would wake up to sirens, and I'd be going to bed to sirens, and I was just having a really hard time sleeping. So they have you have the meditation in the morning, but then they also have these little 25 to 40 minute, I'll call them like bedtime stories that you just kind of throw on, and it's like, I think last night I listened to the guy, the mercenary from Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
The guy.
I don't know, but
yeah. So like it was this like Australian dude talking about like the mountains in New Zealand. So it was just like a nice way to go to bed. So that's one thing I started, and it's one thing I'll take with me for sure out of there. Some of the other ones were stretch mobility, exercise, a lacrosse activity, whether that's film, whether that's wall ball or shooting. No food after 9 p.m. I had the first month I did this, I had text a friend or a family member, but I found that to be way too easy. You know me, CK, I'm talking all the time. I was completing that super easy. So now one of the things in meditation that they talk about is having a lot of gratitude. So one thing I do now every morning after I finish the meditation is I sit down and just write out 5 things I'm grateful for. They can be huge things like the sport of lacrosse, or it could be just like, great weather for a morning workout, something like that, just to keep myself fresh. I try to change that up every morning. I have no booze on there, but I have not, I haven't got 100% any month. But it's one of those. But for me, I kind of put this together as something that like I didn't think I was going to go 100%, right? But like the fact that I have that on my list, now I second guess something. Like listen, if I'm meeting up with the boys, we're going to a barbecue. Like I'm not thinking I'm gonna have a couple beers. It's fine. But like it's those random days where like, all right, let's just let's keep it clean. Read, and then the last one is 105 ounces of water per day. I have no idea if that's the amount of water. I'm 210 pounds, so I just kind of cut my body weight in half. So I try to drink 105 ounces of water every day. So those are my 10 things I try to accomplish. It keeps me busy all day, honestly. Like it's easy to do, but it's harder than you think, like just to make sure you're going through that all during the day.
Did you when you picked half your body weight, did you like get that number from somewhere, or where did you come? How did you come to?
Yeah. I read something just on like some athletic post. I've heard that number be way higher, also way less. I would tell you that like it's a lot of water to drink every day, but like if you don't do it for one day, like just based on like you get dehydrated fairly quickly. So it's something I just try. Like I got this 20 ounce thing here, so fill it up 5 times in a day, you're good to go, right? Or just close.
Just as we before we move on from this list of 10, one thing I've kind of heard from this dude is like his name Naval Ravikant. He's like a big advocate of like meditation, and he talks about meditation being like a skill that you need to like build and work on. When you started doing it, have you found that you've like gotten better at it, or have you found that it was like really hard to start, and like how did you kind of improve that, or what's been your kind of journey through meditation?
Yeah, no, it's hard. It's hard, man. And like CK knows me, I'm a guy that like can't shut up. Like I'm always moving around. So like for me to like sit in a chair 15 minutes with like just myself, just like focusing on breathing was challenging at first. But the interesting part about meditation is like, so you'd be sitting there and they're telling you just to focus on the breathing, and then something comes in your head and you try to like shoo it away really quickly, but like they tell you like it's okay if something comes in, like accept it that it's there and then move on. So I think it's been a nice way to kind of like reset myself and say like not get down on yourself if you can't do it. Just like acknowledge it and keep trucking forward. And the more you do that, like the easier it becomes to just focus on the breath. be present. And really after it, it does feel like the stress has gone down significantly once you can kind of get through it. And the one thing, like anything else, like any lacrosse thing or whatever, if you want to get good at something, you got to practice it, right? So doing it every morning, being consistent with it is you do see the results after a month or two.
And you said you're continuing to do this after Corona. So
yeah, I think it's something like I'm trying to find certain things. You got to find like these positives in these situations, and I got a couple things I've started. I know CK and I were talking about it. Just like I've jump roped way more now, and I was so bad at it when I first started. It's like 2 minutes or 3 minutes I'd be like exhausted, and now so that's like one thing I want to keep with me after, and then the meditation will be with me as well.
Yeah, I love that. I think jumping rope, since I forget where I read it, it was just something, it said like 15 minutes of jumping rope is like 45 minutes of jogging. Once I heard that, I was like, all right, I'm going to do this for now on almost after every workout. And I think it's honestly, I don't even know if that's true, but I thought it was one of the best things for me. I guess in terms of like the working out style, you talk about jump rope. Is there any sort of like go-tos that you want to hit every day? You talk about the HIIT workouts, the weightlifting. Is there stuff that are like a must in your workout?
I've always been I'll call myself like a follower when it comes to workouts. Like I always, like I have some friends that just love, figuring out like, what's going to crush their body. And then I'm just say, hey, just send it to me and I'll do it. I would say the one thing that I focused on more, not so much on the exercise part, but is like mandating that the mobility and the stretching be part of the workout. Like the PLL has sent us all that stuff. Like Jinta does a fantastic job of saying like, hey, lacrosse players have tight hips, ankles, and shoulders. So I'm going to devise these mobility functional movements, to help guys that, that have those problems in lacrosse. So, I've been following those, what's that, Train Heroics or whatever app they sent us. And it's great, man. Like you can tell like some of those things you do with your hips, you realize you could barely move. And then you start thinking to yourself like, well, if I'm going to be running full speed, trying to shoot the ball hard, trying to beat some of these goalies, like I need better hip mobility to be able to shoot. So it's kind of the same thing as with the meditating. Like if you commit to practicing it over and over again, you can just feel yourself being able to do more. And that helps you then when you're actually working out too. Not only just when you're doing lacrosse, you feel like you can squat better, you're stronger. So mobility is probably one of the things I've focused on in terms of like the exercise portion.
I like it. Is there anything? See, it sounds like you've kind of experimented with different types of workouts and stuff like that with your routines and lifestyle or whatever. But as far as like adding to lacrosse and things that benefit you with lacrosse, is there anything that you've like experimented with in the past that ended up being like a bad investment of time, or anything that like you were trying to do and ended up having to kind of cut it out and add it to your not to do list and ended up being like, that was a waste of time?
I used to lift like my upper body like fairly heavy in college. And I never really, guys certainly still probably do it, but, I never felt that it was like, I would bench press and I was like, I don't know if this is really helping me. I'm not like an offensive tackle, like trying to block somebody. But I guess it was probably more my fault because I would lift heavy and then like when you don't, I'd go back in the gym and then try to do all that weight and then all of a sudden I'm sore for 3 days and I can't like lift my arm. So then I moved pretty much after college to like all like getting rid of most weight stuff, and just doing kind of like, low weight, high rep workouts that I've found have just made me feel, I'm still feeling strong, but I'm not feeling sore after them.
Right. I think just from playing with you, I think you got one of the biggest motors I've ever seen on the field and on the floor. Do you has that started from like day one, or did you work on that as a kid, or how did that sort of develop?
Yeah, I've always been super competitive. My high school coach was also my gym teacher, and he would he'd tell us a story. He'd have to like stop me in gym because I was like going way too hard in volleyball, just like weird stuff like that. I've always just been like super competitive, and like if I'm gonna do something, like even when it's board games, like my family gets mad at me because like people aren't like paying attention or they're not like doing the right thing. Like I'd be that guy at the blackjack table who's getting pissed that guys aren't playing the right way, just because I'm like, if I'm gonna do something, like I want to do it well. I want to be good at it. And I've always found like just bringing energy, bringing that positive motor to things is just gonna like, it helps elevate, like from a team sport perspective. I think it helps elevate a lot of guys who maybe just don't have that like naturally wake up and just want to sprint out of bed type mentality.
Yeah, you talking about like kind of going back a little bit. This is gonna sound weird. Like I remember like watching you in college. Like, obviously, you were always kind of like a big midfielder. Obviously, use your body really well to your advantage. And so this is part I was gonna say is like sounds weird. Like you're obviously blessed with a great body. At what point did you kind of like start to use that as an advantage? And like, were you always bigger than kids? And like, how did you kind of like come about like trying to just kind of maximize your body and use your size to your advantage? And like, is there anything that you do to kind of like work on that's different from maybe a smaller, quicker guy?
Yeah. It's funny. I wasn't always the biggest kid. When I was like growing up, like way back in youth, I was always really fast. And then right around 7th grade, I like just basically lost my speed and was kind of like freaking out. I was like, I just can't run anymore. And from like 7th grade to almost about 10th grade, I couldn't run. I moved to attack because I just couldn't. My knees were just bothering me the whole time. And what it was like I grew like an insane amount like the beginning of high school. So I think it was something like my freshman year I played football. I was like 5'7", 135 pounds. And then I played sophomore year lacrosse at like 6'2", 180. So it was like a year and a half I grew like in an insane amount. And then like my sophomore year, it was kind of like when Forrest Gump breaks out of the leg braces. Like all of a sudden I could just run again. But now I'm like 6'2", so it's like I'm fast and big. So once I got back to that, like I always had this kind of like mentality of like I'm not going around somebody, I'm going through them, and that didn't really fare me that well when I was like growing up because I couldn't run. And then it was kind of that same mentality. I just kept using that, just run straight, and I kind of subscribed to just put your shoulder down into a guy. By the 4th quarter, he's not going to want to not going to want to have that in his chest anymore.
Right, 100%. So I guess from your game standpoint, you were that bruiser, that downhill guy. Did it develop at all, like differently in high school to college to the pros? Did it change up at all, or did you want to see any changes in your game?
Yeah, I would say the biggest. I was probably a very similar player, high school and college. Because, in high school, I could just get to my left hand, at will. There's videos of me in high school. I could barely even put the ball in my right hand. I didn't need to. And it was like that for a decent amount of college. But then when you'd play the better teams, you go against like Jesse Bernhardt in Maryland. It's like, you got to do something else because that guy's going to keep up with you every step of the way. So I had to work on my right hand. I don't think it got much better until maybe my junior year in college. And if I could go back, that's probably one thing that I would have started working on earlier. It would be one of two things: either start working on my right hand earlier or start playing box lacrosse earlier. Because I played in the NLL the year after I graduated, and it was my first kind of foray into box lacrosse. And I would tell you that following summer and every subsequent summer of playing field, I think I've been a better lacrosse player for it. So where a lot of guys, as they work later on in their lives, like, college, it might be where they hit their peak. I actually think from a lacrosse perspective, I've gotten better over the years by just implementing those nuances in box.
Yeah, I feel like Connor has talked a lot about that too, and would love to kind of dig into that a little bit, but just going back to, you said like your junior year is where you started like really developing your right hand a little bit. Going from your sophomore to junior year and obviously recognizing that was a weakness for you and you need to get that better. How did you go about doing that summer or the fall, going from your sophomore to junior year? Like, was it like 90% of the time you were going out and shooting and hitting the wall? Was it just all your weak hand, or like what did you kind of change to really pick that up?
Yeah, you nailed it. It's the mindset when you're training, and it's funny. And now when I train kids, like I try to help them not make the same mistake that I did. You know, like when you go out there with a bucket of balls and you think you're the man because you're shooting from 11 yards sidearm lefty every time. You know, you don't realize that that's not the type of shot you're gonna get in a game. So I think like when I started thinking about like, hey, where am I getting on the field as a midfielder? Like, what shots am I actually seeing, or what opportunities am I getting on the field that I'm not even thinking about shooting because I'm just not either comfortable or it's not in my head. So I really just started working on that. And at that point, you know, everybody was really blocking off my left hand. So I kind of figured it's at this point now where like if I just work on, I don't even really need to split left to right. I can just run straight with my right hand and use my speed because people are so much taking it away. So really that alley dodge with my right hand to be able to shoot that, to at least invite, because then what happens is then it invites a slide, right? People are going to say, okay, he can't shoot the ball right-handed, so we're not going to slide. You know, ideally what I do is just I draw a slide and I go right down the side, give it to the attackmen who, you know, are way more skilled than I am. You know, that's how we want the offense to run. So just working on that, day in and day out in the summertime just got me to a point where I was just more comfortable with it, and I wasn't thinking about it as much during the games.
And then with the box lacrosse stuff, so like one thing that we ask a lot of the people we've been interviewing is kind of like, if you could go back to when you're 12, 13 years old, what would you tell yourself to do the same? What would you tell yourself to do differently? So you kind of hit on, obviously, would love to have kind of told yourself to get that right hand a little bit earlier. But what's your biggest takeaway? What's the big benefit for you that you see that has really helped your game jump from the box point of view?
Yeah, and I do play defense in box, so it's not as, you know, from an offensive perspective, it's more the transition stuff. You have to do so much in such a small confined area that your stick skills are naturally going to get much better. Even the D guys in box that are, you know, Canadian, they're just fantastic with the stick in transition. It's so much harder to score because you really do, in order to score, you have to get the goalie to move, because he could just sit there and you have to pick maybe 4 or 5 squares on the net to hit to actually get it past him. So it's the tightness in the game, I think that has helped me out a lot, and also just understanding, like, you know, playing the pick and roll and not being able to just kind of chuck the ball and hope the guy gets it. It's putting it in a confined area for him. And I really think it's very beneficial to start that at an early age, because, you know, I always kind of go back to, if you think about your practice for a summer league and you're running through the guys, you're doing the 3-man weave to kind of warm up their hands, and you get one kid that throws the ball and it goes out of bounds, and the kid's chasing it down into the next field to get back in the drill. You know, whereas in box, if you do that, you just kind of turn around and pick it up and get right back in. So these kids are getting, you know, in an hour and a half practice, they could be getting 2 to 3 times more reps with just the ball in their stick than a kid doing summer outdoor lacrosse. And then when you think about that, of like every practice of their entire lives, that's why you see all these Canadians that lead NCAA in scoring, because their stick skills are just naturally better. And that's where I saw my game improve, was just like what I was able to do with the stick in tight quarters that I just would have thought of, you know, without that experience.
100%. And I can like attest to like just to understanding the game and the nuances of the 2-man game, even the 3-man, like working on a side of just, hey, if I get this 1 foot of space, I'm going to cut this way. For you on the defensive end, has that helped you not only understand the defensive side of things, transitioning to field, but has that understand like what can I get offensively in the field game, just understanding defense-wise?
Yeah, I mean, without question. I mean, you think about what keeps defenses up at night, right? And you watch these offenses that do certain things, and you're thinking to yourself, man, like if we're spending this much time trying to learn or trying to defend it, there's a reason that they're doing it, and I've had the opportunity to play with a bunch of Canadians in field lacrosse, and we've incorporated a ton of the two man, even on like high dodges too, just to create a little bit, 3-4 yards of space that you can now use to run at somebody. That starts off with a simple two man game. So yeah, I think just trying to figure out how to defend it is, your kind of blueprint for what you should be doing, because defenses have a problem with it.
Right.
Connor, what would you say? This is the first time I kind of asked you a question, but anything that John didn't talk about that you've kind of seen as like a big benefit on the offensive side from like picking up the box game? Like you said, you'd never played box until after college.
I mean, he just hits it pretty much. It's just like the tight windows. Your stick works ultimately get better. And honestly, it's just a great point about like you're in the box game or you're in the box for 2 hours. You get 3 times more touches, and it truly helps you a ton. So I think honestly, I agree with everything. I think he hits everything on the nail. So I guess with this. So now that you've jumped into the box game, you went to college, you went to Hopkins, have your like personal goals of lacrosse players evolved? Like, what is your sort of goals for this season? Are you setting them higher, or what do you try to fit for this year?
Yeah, it's funny. Like I've thought about this more. I'm going into my 8th year playing outdoors, to be my 7th playing indoor, and I don't necessarily raise them because I think they're fairly high. My two things every year are, what can I do to be the best teammate that I can be, and what can I do to help our team win a championship, right? Those are like, to me, those are the two goals of mine: be the best teammate I can be and win a championship. So I try to, I'm a simple guy. I try to keep it fairly simple because to me, you're there to do your job, right? Like I want to do my job to the highest ability, and I want to be there for my teammates. Those are, keep it simple, and, maybe you'll change certain things on how you train for that. But to me, that comes down to those two things every time.
Right. So with that, I mean, honestly, one of the best teammates I've had on the Riptide. We've had plenty of hours spent on the floor and off the floor, all great times. You won Teammate of the Year 2018? 2019. So obviously well earned. Was this developed at a young age, and like a lot of things you learn are from other people, maybe like mentors or guys you played with or older guys? When did that sort of start, just being focused on being a great teammate? And did you learn it from anybody?
I think so. I think I definitely have to go back to my dad. He's actually taught me a ton. But he was one of those guys, like when we would play in the youth, 4th grade, 5th grade, there was obviously guys that played for our town, in our local town club that just weren't very good. He would always harp on like, make the right pass, right? So like, let's say there's a guy on our team and he's wide open, but like, I know there's a 10% chance he's going to actually catch the ball. I wouldn't throw it to him, and my dad would always harp on me, right? Like, you got to throw it to him. You got to throw it to him because you got to get his confidence up. Try to elevate him to your level. And I wasn't thinking about that back then. I was thinking to myself, well, Dad, like, I'm better than this kid. Like, I'm just going to run through the other guy and then try to shoot it. So he definitely helped me with that. And I think what also helped me was, on my high school team in Yorktown, it was all of my best friends were on the team. So like, I never thought, I've obviously had dreams of playing in college, but it was so unique and such a fun time for me to just be like with all my best friends playing a sport we love to play. And, I've just been fortunate to have that with a lot of the teams that I've been on. But I think that just like that mindset of like, man, this is awesome. Like it's all my good buddies playing lacrosse. Like we love this. Like let's just have a great time. Kind of was instilled in me at a young age, but then like reinforced in high school that like this is the way things should be. So I try to, every place I go, I try to, build that type of culture of, making sure that you become friends off the floor, because I think it does have a huge impact on the floor.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like that's absolutely huge. In Maryland, that was obviously a big thing that everyone talks about. You talked about kind of just going back from times of like your dad kind of coaching you, and then obviously through college and through the pros. Just looking back, are there any bad recommendations that you've heard in the lacrosse world that you kind of stick out to you and would want to like point out, or just any bad recommendations that you hear and kind of want to expose?
Yeah, the worst one I hear is, I mean, and this gets beaten pretty heavily, but just the specialization of the sport. I played football. I played soccer. I was a ski racer. I was a kid, like I loved playing lacrosse, and I gravitated to that when the time, presented itself. To see kids like quit other sports, to me, I don't get it. I think I've learned so much, like my leg strength comes from being a slalom skier, like my ability to put my foot in the ground and dodge comes from me being a running back. And going back to the team thing, it's like I had a blast, like making new friends, other friends that didn't play lacrosse, that played other sports. Like you pick up so much from different styles of coaches, different teammates, different sports, that if you just, narrow yourself to the lacrosse world, you're missing out on a lot of opportunities, in my opinion. So that was one thing I really appreciate my parents for. Like, every time I wanted to go to a lacrosse camp in the summer, they would send me and everything, but they would also, make sure that I was participating in other things, I think, which helps me now.
Yeah, I feel like that's definitely been like a unanimous answer we've been hearing. Kind of looking back when you were kind of playing different sports and juggling different sports, obviously getting the benefit of all of them. How did lacrosse like work into that? Did you kind of like finish up the spring and then just play through the summer and then just put the stick down completely through the fall and through the winter, or did you kind of just mix it in here and there, or kind of how did you allocate time to lacrosse while you were playing other sports?
Yeah, I never gave it up throughout the year, but that's just because I knew that's what I was super passionate about. So I would, we would have, the town that I'm from is it's kind of like a high school in Alabama with football. I mean, everybody, kind of grows up playing lacrosse. So we'd have certain we'd get together and, do wall ball, do some shooting, but it would be more fun. Like it wouldn't be like, this, a year round thing. But I always kept the stick in my hand, just because I wanted to. But that's the big difference, right? Like when you can make that decision on your own, like, yeah, I'm doing all these other things, but I want to make sure I stay with lacrosse. Like that's a good thing. That shows you're passionate about it, not just, having it shoved down your throat for 10 months of the year, and then all of a sudden you get burned out. So I think it's important to have the kids make that decision on their own. And then once you find something you're passionate about, then you'll find ways to do it all the time.
Right. I think it's like a huge, just like getting into the coaching side of things and just trying to like push kids and saying like, hey, follow your passion, like, and telling them like, not you should love lacrosse, but like, if you love it, continue to push yourself. Like, is there a balance you see like in coaching, whether to like, if they sort of truly do not like it or hate it, to continue to push them and maybe they'll end up liking it? Is there sort of like something you think about in terms of that coaching style, if I asked that right?
Yeah, well, I think he did, and not to put the blame on somebody else, but I think that's a lot. I think a lot of that's the parent driven. Like I'll get a kid. I'm starting to work with him, and I don't converse with the kid. I converse with the parent. They say, Tommy's super interested. He's all for it, and then you get to the field, and the kid's, watching birds while you're trying to teach him how to shoot, and it's like the kid just, it's obvious he doesn't want to be here. On the flip side, you get other kids that like, I'll I'll work with them, and then they'll send me like videos, that they saw on Instagram that, hey, I remember you were talking about this, and I saw this online, and it's like, all right, like this kid, he gives a crap, right? Like to me, that's something that you see right off the bat. And you can tell who's pushing the agenda, right? Is the kid, begging their parents for another lesson for another tournament, or is their parent just, making the kid do it?
Right.
You talked about kids kind of sending you stuff on social media. Do you have any favorite social media accounts that you follow to either help you with the way you train or the way you kind of think about nutrition, or favorite meditation, anything like that, or just lacrosse content that you kind of get the most value out of, whether it be lacrosse or just from the mental side?
Yeah. I would say I gotta plug the PLL here, because I think they've done an outstanding job of providing really awesome content of the game. I mean, I really have never. As a lacrosse fan, I've just been so excited just to be a part of it, because they're capturing things on the field that the three of us have been like, yeah, this is why this sport is dope, right? Like, people are doing like this really cool stuff, but now they're capturing it, and they're capturing it in camera angles they never did before. So I've not to plug our our entity that I'm a shareholder of, but I tell kids all the time, watch as much PLL as you can, because you're going to pick up on things. I'm picking up on things, that you just never saw before.
And working off that, just obviously, again, you're super immersed in the lacrosse community. You've probably seen the sport grow a lot. Where do you see lacrosse in 10 years? And like, best case scenario for lacrosse in 10 years, if you had unlimited resources and could kind of plant the seed to get it there in the next 6 months to a year, what would you kind of be doing with that? And just where do you see lacrosse, best case scenario in 10 years, kind of inspire younger kids a little bit to keep pushing and keep having goals to play professionally like you guys?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is getting sticks in hands, right? Like, I came from from an, I'll call it an upper to middle class family, but a lacrosse background that was, I didn't get a new stick every year, but I never had a problem getting equipment, right? And you think about I think about the equipment that we get every, I play in 2 lacrosse leagues, so I get a whole mess of stuff every, twice a year. Not to mention all the other things I can get through other sponsors or whatever. And what I try to do with that is I try to just give that to Bronx Lacrosse. A kid that I went to high school with started that. It's a tremendous program. But you got to think those cleats that we got, the 16 cleats that I had from Hopkins, that 10 of them still had the wrapping in the shoe. That's $100. That's $80, $90. Plus the sticks are super, like, when was the last time you bought a stick, right? I can't even remember. So just getting all of that equipment to kids is the biggest thing. That's the barrier to entry, I think, in our sport. Because I think when you and I've spent a lot of time with the Bronx, like when you hear these kids talk about lacrosse, they love it. Like, it's just a fun, and we all know this, right? It's a fun game, but what's their access to it? That's the problem, right? You get sticks in people's hands, this thing's going to catch like wildfire, in my opinion. So hopefully that's the PLL can, I hope, continue to grow that, both from like a viewership standpoint, and then I think it's on us to to spread not only the equipment but our knowledge of it too.
Does that Bronx Lacrosse stuff, do they do anything besides just obviously distributing the equipment for you to donate to? Do they do anything else? Well,
yeah, it's similar. It's a similar setup to Harlem. So they provide, it's like really an after school program that is centered around lacrosse. So an example would be the kids need to maintain a certain grade point average to play on the team. So it incentivizes those kids, to maintain their grades. And I'm gonna blank on the statistic, and I can certainly get it to you because I was at the fundraiser this past year. But it was something like their high school graduation rate in that southern Bronx area is really, really bad on average, and the kids that participate in Bronx lacrosse is 2 or 3 times that number. So it's providing a real outlet for these kids, while also providing them opportunities to get into, whether it's a boarding high school or just in a high school in general, even if it's not lacrosse related, it's kept their grades up and it's allowed them a different path in life, which is just tremendous.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. I think that's the biggest thing towards our growth is obviously the exposure from the professional level down to the youth, but getting sticks in hands. And you said you are in a hotbed for lacrosse, obviously Yorktown. But was there something that sort of, obviously it's grown a ton, the game. Was there something that you sort of went through as a kid? Obviously you didn't know right from wrong then, but now being a professional, being like, hey, we could have done this better or stuff like that. Not to obviously say anything bad, but is there any improvements that you should that you see
in just like lacrosse in general?
In the youth, just growing up on how like what's
yeah. Well, I mean, this like, I'm a couple of years older than you. See, this club program thing to me is insane. Like I went to a developmental camp once a year from like 5th grade all the way through my freshman year. And then I played in the Empire Games my sophomore and junior, and that's how I went to college. And now that timeline doesn't make sense anymore because you have all these club programs. And I don't want to say all club programs are bad because they certainly provide, a lot of value. But the costs, especially in this area, are crazy. Like it's something I don't think my parents would even have been willing to do for me. Right. And like at this point, it's like you're not like unless you're an undeniable talent, you need those club programs to help get yourself recruited. And that's just that's a whole different conversation of like the monetization of youth sports. But, that's just, I guess, my take on it.
Have you had any vivid failures through your career that you kind of really learned from and helped you to kind of build success later that you kind of look back on and think obviously it sucked in the moment, but kind of helped build success for you?
Yeah. Well, my senior year of Hopkins would probably be the biggest failure. I mean, we were the number 1 recruiting class. We were, I think my junior and senior year, we were a combined like 25-7, something like that. Like we were really, really good. A lot of expectations came in. Some off the field issues had happened in the fall, which I don't necessarily want to get into, but basically the result of those kind of stayed with us during the spring. We never could get past it. And one of the biggest lesson, and I've tried to, when I talk to, high school programs and I talk to people again, I try to talk about controlling controllables, right? Like, the situation that we had, at that point, it was no longer in our control. So harping on it, worrying about it, doing all the rest, that's just not doing anything for you. So I've tried to keep that mantra, of just saying like, hey, what's in front of me? Can I control this? If not, then I can't worry about it. What can I control? How hard you work, what kind of teammate you are, what kind of leader you are. I can control those things every day. So let me repurpose all my energy there. If I had known that as a senior captain of back then in college, maybe we would have had a different outcome because, obviously as a leader, guys are looking to me and I'm worrying about things that I can't control, and everybody's going to follow that. So that's probably the biggest lesson that I've learned, through failure in lacrosse.
That's an awesome one. And honestly, you maybe realize this now or right after college, but maybe since it was a year, your whole senior year, and you were a leader on that team, I guess maybe the initial loss to end your career, sort of, could you go back into those thoughts of like, did you blame yourself? Was it like blame on others? Like, how did you sort of go through that sort of process?
Yeah, it was a lot of self-blame. It was a tough time, and that's kind of the second part about, what I've kind of learned through that process is like, obviously as a kid, like I had guys in my high school that went to Hopkins. So I grew up wanting to go to Hopkins and I wanted to go to win a national championship at Hopkins. And obviously that didn't happen. Right. But, to your point, like, something crazy happened the day after we lost in the morning. The sun came up, like the world didn't end because I didn't succeed in what I wanted to do. So that was kind of, and I believe me, I didn't know that day. It took a long time for me to kind of look back and say, this all wasn't for naught, right? But that's one thing that, that I've also taken with me now is that, like, losses in life, failures in life are going to happen. Dwelling on those things are really not going to do you that good. What the biggest thing you should be worrying about is, like, I failed. Why did I fail? How am I going to make sure I don't do that again? Because when you fail at something twice for the same reason, then it becomes a really bad pattern.
Right. Just kind of piggybacking off that, like, obviously, like, the goal is always, it seems like, to win a championship. But I mean, obviously, at the end of the day, it's one team, and it's really hard to do. If you had to define success without using the words win or winning a championship, how would you do that?
I go back to the relationships you can build when it comes to lacrosse. Because the game, the wins and losses, in a lot of ways, they do fade after a while. Like, when I think about my high school team, there's a couple of wins, of course, you remember, right? But, like, that's not really what I talk about with my friends from home. I just talk about those memories that we made, all the fun times we had together. And as I get older, you realize that these on the field things, they matter for sure. Don't get me wrong. That's why you get so close with these guys, because you get to a point where it's like, this game only matters to a certain amount of people. So, like, you're in the locker room with the New York Riptide. These guys have been playing lacrosse for 20 some odd years. These are the ones that have taken it so seriously that you're at the peak of your, so you have that common bond with them. But I've found that, like, I've really enjoyed, the relationships that I've built, the fun times I've had with these people, more so than I have the wins and losses. Now I'm still, we're still, training like crazy to win this PLL championship series. But after it's all over, we're going to be saying, how crazy was that? Like, we were in Utah for 3 weeks together, and, hopefully I'm talking about a win, but, if you're not, it's still going to be a fun time, I think.
Right, 100%. And I think that's huge as an athlete to realize. It's like, hey, the sun does come up the next day and you go through those tough times. Did you learn that, obviously, now, but was there stuff early on that sort of kept you up at night from lacrosse standpoint? Was it in high school or college, like, God, I'm not getting better at this, or I'm not winning a championship? Like, am I doing something wrong? Is there any self-doubt in that regard?
Yeah, because it's funny because, like, it wasn't when I was a kid, I didn't say, that I wanted to get into sales or I wanted to do this. Like, when I was a kid, I wanted to play lacrosse at Johns Hopkins, right? So, like, in your, little mini world as a teenager, like, there's nothing past that. You just kind of, that's everything you're trying to accomplish. And then it's like, you're doing it every day. So naturally, it's like, you put a lot of pressure on yourself to succeed, which in a way is good, right? Because, you're so worried about failing that you don't want to do it. But I think there's better ways to channel that fear than just being like, gripping the stick too tight. And I think I've learned that as I've gotten older, that, some of those old wise tricks would have been useful in college.
Yeah, and that's, like, one thing I kind of wanted to, like, hit on too. Like, I didn't have nearly the success as you guys, like, going through college, and, like, obviously, like, my failures kind of lost a lot of sleep over them, and, like, so much I wish I did differently. But just kind of, like, being a little bit out now and just, like, looking back, like, so I stopped playing my sophomore year. I did my third ACL, hung them up after that, and then kind of stuck with the team for the last 2 years. And I mean, it felt like torture, like, kind of showing up at practice every day, but, like, just being a part of the team and just, like, staying a part of my class and just, like, at the end of the day, like, the wins and losses, like, obviously I wish I would have been on the field, and, like, I feel like there's a lot of memories that, like, I missed out on, but just, like, having the guys and, like, just the relationships you build, like, it's 100% worth it. Like, even for a kid that's, like, wants to go and play in college and, like, maybe they don't have the success, like, if they just stick with it, like, getting out of the 4 years in college, I feel like it's 100% worth it to make it through and, like, stick with your guys. And just, that's, like, been the biggest takeaway kind of looking back for me, for sure.
And you only feel that more the older you get, man. I'm telling you. Like, it was a great time. But, it's those to me, it always goes back to the relationships. And I think that's maybe, one of the things why I'm so hell bent on being a good teammate, because I know that you build a good relationship with somebody. That's a relationship for life. You're going to be able to, to enjoy that forever.
Is there any, obviously we talked about you being like a great teammate or anything like that. Is there anything that you've kind of like added to, like, outside of just being like a positive guy or anything like that? Like, what do you think makes like a really good teammate, or what are some small things that you do that you've kind of gotten gratitude from other guys about just you as a teammate?
For me, it's just asking questions, getting to know people. I do that, to be a good teammate, but I also I do it almost selfishly in a way, because I think there's so much to learn from other people, what they've gone through, their different experiences, their different upbringings, like how they view different things, right? Like, you're not going to ever know that unless you ask. So I've always just been like a curious person, but and I don't think people get asked those questions about themselves as much as maybe they should. So I've gotten my curious nature has sparked different conversations that I've had with teammates that have gotten me ultimately closer with them. So I think it's just like little things like that. Just getting to know your guys, knowing them, because, it's funny. You can say you love people and you can say, all these things, but you don't want to say it and not mean it. Right. So, putting that extra work in, just like you'd put your work in on, on your shot or on feeding or on dodging, like those extra miles you go for your teammates in simple things, I think pay off big time.
You talked about just kind of selfishly, trying to take things, obviously it's not selfish, but trying to benefit selfishly from asking questions. Is there anyone that you've kind of leaned on and asked a lot of questions, or anyone, you can name names if you want, but anyone that you kind of asked a lot of questions and have just learned a ton from, and kind of what did you learn from them that you've really implemented into your life?
Yeah, I would say so. I've played outdoor professionally with the same core of maybe 4 or 5 guys since I started. So this is my 8th summer. Being with guys like Joel White, John Galloway, Mike Manley, Jordan McIntosh, Jordan Wolf. And we've had a crew together, and I've learned so much, not only, just from every walk of life, the way that they carry themselves with, their family members. I've gotten to meet all their families, the way that they, carry themselves in the business world, the way that they coach, the way that they, the way that they act, for me, in a lot of ways, they've been really good role models for me, they're guys I want to associate myself with, I think is the way I look at it. And I hope I do the same for them. But I think just having that group has been, really special for me in my life.
We'll try not to keep you too long. Start wrapping it up here in a couple minutes, but with all the different things that you've done in the past 5 years, what would you say has been the number one change that you've made that's been the most beneficial to you?
I think I'd go back to the things I'm doing from a health perspective outside of just your normal exercising, right? When I was when I came out of school, I could, eat Doritos all day, drink a ton of beers and wake up and just still crush workouts, right? And then I was really fortunate to have Brody Merrill was my captain of my first ever indoor team. And he was 32, 33 at the time. So an older player in the league. But the way, the things he talked about with his mobility, with how he ate, how he just carried himself. Now I look back, he's still playing in these leagues, right? So it's you look at when he was talking about these things, it was kind of one ear out the other for me as a 22-year-old playing in this league, because I could wake up after, a crazy game and a night out and still be able to do all these things I wanted to do. The body can only be like that for so long, and I'm very fortunate to have had him when I did, because it got, even though it was in one ear out the other, it was still it was lost somewhere back there. So taking care of my body in terms of the mobility, of just watching what I eat, not going crazy, but just watching what I eat. I think that's been the biggest change because that kind of stuff impacts not only lacrosse but just like your natural health, right? You don't wake up with these aches and pains. I still do, just from the the beating we take on the field, but I think that's probably been the biggest change I've made. As I'm getting closer to 30.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Honestly, it's like I was with Brody, and he was just so meticulous about everything. I remember just watching him in the locker room before the games, after the games, and he's like, what is he drinking? What is he eating? He's got this whole setup going. And I think you just realize that as like a player, it's like there's going to be that point, that breaking point for your body, maybe mentally, but definitely physically. And it happens sooner or later for most guys. So just being more aware of that, especially when you're young. And it's all about longevity.
Well, and the other thing, with the point you just bring up, it's like I think a lot of this, like the yoga and the meditation and the mobility things, like I think that's also strengthening me mentally, right? So to your point, like when your physical attributes start to decline, you need to be smart. You need to be smarter. You need to be, if you want to keep yourself playing, you got to get better in places that you weren't good at, right? And you can't do it physically anymore. So where can you succeed? Being better mentally is huge.
With all you've kind of gathered through your career from different people, it's something that I've kind of like wanted to ask. This is the first time asking it. I've kind of wondered, just like 36 hours before game time for you, like what is your like routine, and like what are you doing to like get your body like and just feeling as good as possible for games? Like what's like the 36 hours leading up to that, or if it's just a 24-hour thing, but what's kind of your routine to like get in peak performance, like peak shape, mental performance, body feeling the best before a game?
And I have no idea if this is right or not. I love having like kind of it's 36, almost like the third. So if we play Saturday night, I love having a big pasta meal on Thursday. That's like my every like pretty much every Thursday, because I play in both leagues year round. Every Thursday is a nice pasta meal. I look forward to it every week. I try to stay away from my phone leading up to games. I just feel distracted with it, and I want to be more present. So I try to stay away from the phone as best I can. It's crazy because I work another job, so like a lot of the times I'm finishing up work on a Friday and then I'm rushing to LaGuardia. So usually it's like by the time I get to LaGuardia, that's when I kind of really start like just like kind of dialing in my mental aspect, my mental training. It's that, and it's hydrating like crazy. I always got a water bottle here, that I'm putting in my backpack to just make sure I'm staying hydrated. There you go. Hydration's key, boys.
Cheers.
But I'm not, what does Michael Scott say? He's like, I'm not superstitious, but I am a little stitious. So I got a couple things I like to do, but I'm not too crazy.
And then is there anything you like to do to help yourself like recover, like right after games, like after just anything super strenuous like that?
I bought one of those Hyper Ice guns. Man, those things are fantastic. I try to do that like, when I get home from wherever I'm going, really just unwind with that. And I also bought a pair of those knockoff Normatecs. So I try to Sunday is always and I will say this too, Sunday, I don't give a crap what I'm eating. Sunday's my day. I'm a big sucker for cheesesteaks. So I usually I'm ordering the cheesesteak while I'm in the Uber back from the airport, so that I can get it when I get home. That's my day off from the good eating.
Love it.
Last couple of questions here. You talked about like you liked like the ice gun or something, whatever. But are there any purchases under $100 that would, or I'll rephrase it. What would be your favorite purchase under $100 that brings you the most joy?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'd have to go, because I've been getting into, I'm just going to say my Spotify membership. It's a cheap one, $10 a month. But like, I've gotten way more into podcasts lately. So I've been using that a lot, and I'm not like, I do like music, but I don't I'm not like a big playlist guy. I steal, just like my workouts, I steal people's playlists. But I do find myself, especially in quarantine now, like a lot more on Spotify from like music and playlists. So that's probably the most enjoyment I get from under $100.
What do you got? What do you got for go-to pods?
I like it's Morning Brew has one called Business Casual, and they get a lot of founders and CEOs of really cool companies. And what I mean I don't hear them talk as much, but the woman that does it, I think her name is Kinsey Grant. She just has this way of kind of making it a very personal conversation. So like you're learning a lot, but you're also getting a very good insight to these, because at the end of the day, these super successful people, they're human too, right? So like to hear kind of them like talk about what they're really good at, and then talk about just some of the things I like to do on the side, I find interesting.
What do you got? Anything else you like to do on the side to kind of help you unwind, or if you're feeling stressed, anything you got outside of lacrosse that you like to do?
Yeah, so I love skiing. I mean, I think I might like just like the actual sport. Like if I could spend a day on a mountain or spend a day on a lacrosse field, I might pick skiing. I love it. And then I've actually recently gotten more into hiking. When I went on my trip, I hiked this mountain in Portugal, and it was like just so awesome to be like kind of by yourself, just like getting to the top of the mountain and looking down. You're like, look what I just climbed up. Like it, so I think when I stop playing, I'm gonna get more into like. There's a lot of cool things you can do in New York. Like you can like hike all the 46 peaks in the Adirondacks. Like I think I'm gonna start picking up that. And the last one would be biking. I don't really like to run, but I my buddy bought one of those bikes that like they're like 20 pounds, maybe even lighter, and 3 pedals and you're flying. So I'm probably going to be in like one of those biker gangs, that just like do these like super long bike rides when I'm done playing. Find something to compete in, I guess.
What about also, sorry, you brought up, you do a little bit of reading. If you could pick one book to give as a gift, what would you pick?
Ooh. You know what I would pick? I would pick Lawrence Taylor's Autobiography. That was one of the few books I remember that I literally just couldn't put down. I mean, the stories of that guy, like what he was doing, and to be that dominant was like, I mean, you thought these stories were made up, and what I liked about the way that the autobiography was set up was like it was about him, but it would be like it would tell you like who's talking right now. So it would be like a linebacker on the Giants, and it would just basically be like story after story of just like unbelievable things that this guy was doing. That was like the one book I remember that I literally like I couldn't put down.
Wow, I gotta check that out.
Any memorable ones that stick out, like stories?
In the story, yeah, like there was one where I think they're playing the Redskins or the Cowboys, and I think it was the Cowboys, and this is how a lot of the stories would end up. Like they'd go into excruciating detail about whatever happened, and it was basically like they wanted to mess with him and to get him off his track. So they sent two female guests to his hotel room, and basically spent the night up all night, not sleeping. So he goes through all these things, and then like at the end of every story, it was like, yeah, and then I woke up, had 4 sacks, and we won by 20. Like so, like crazy stuff like that, like just completely unfazed. There's some wild ones in there.
Yeah. Connor, what do you think?
Billboard it up.
Billboard? All right. So this is our last one. If you could put something on a billboard for billions of people to see every single day, like a quote or something, what would you put on there?
Ooh. I could pick a billboard that everybody could see. I think I'd just keep it real light and just do something like have a good day.
Have a good day.
Like give somebody like something like I'm not an inspiring type person. I don't think. I just want, like I think there's a lot of people that would be on the road, going to a job they don't like, sitting in traffic or whatever, that like could see that and maybe crack even if it's a half a smile, see that on their way to work, make them feel better.
I remember I worked at a pizzeria like my sophomore year of high school or like junior year of high school, and like driving there was always this white house with just a giant smiley face on the side of it. And every time I was just like, all right, like I guess this is kind of cool. This is brightening my day 1%.
Yeah, get you in a good mood, and maybe like have a good day, and like I'd have like a beach behind it or something, or like just a nice backdrop of the slogan.
All right, I like it. Find your beach.
That's it. Yeah. I wouldn't want to steal it too much from Corona, but like that's the vibe that I'm going with.
Yeah, well, we're not anti-Corona podcast here.
Exactly, I like that.
All right, this is great. I really appreciate it. Anything you think we could have asked you that we missed or anything like that, just based on the conversation?
No, I mean, it was a lot of fun. I've never been on a podcast before, so you guys were my first. I know I'm your sixth.
Yeah,
I hope it went well.
We're a little ahead of you.
Made it.
Yeah, it was easy conversation. I think I think you guys did a great job of like keeping it flowing and just keeping it light and hopefully informative for some people too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think you did a great job of that for sure.
Awesome.
I kind of like listening to like just. I've gotten way into podcasts like during Corona, and I like it's kind of like anything else. You just kind of like you try to listen and just kind of take one thing that you hear, because you hear so many freaking good things, and like it's like we're talking about all these things about like water and all the rest. It's like half the time I'm getting it just from a podcast. Like somebody was talking about it. Like I got respect for that person. So
that's literally how I live my life, I feel like.
Exactly.
Love it. Well, Randy, this was awesome. Again, I knew this was going to be a great conversation, so it was great. I can't wait to clip this up and post it, but we appreciate your support, and thanks for coming on.
Absolutely, guys. Yeah, happy to be on. Maybe if this thing goes crazy, I could be like a recurring guest at some point,
Yeah.
We can come back and talk.
Yo, I was thinking like Jolo said on his, where he said the thing at the end, he was like, I tried not to be a hardo, but kind of got a little carried away. I was like, we should get a t-shirt with like the train my game, and then like on the back, just like hardo free zone or something like that.
I like that. I gotta listen to Jolo's. I'm sure that's going to be an interesting one.
It was a good one. He was great. That was our first one too. So a little bumpy on our end.
Starting off with a bang.
Great bookends right now. Great bookends.
There you go.
Yeah. This is the deciding factor. So you have to see if we get the 7 or not.
I think you guys get there.
All right, man. I appreciate it. This is awesome. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, guys. Take it easy.
All right.
John,
Peace out.
Saturday.
Yep.